Today's lesson is a white heron. Hello, everybody. I'm Roger.
And my name is Helen.
And today we are going to continue to summarize our featured story, A White Heron. Remember, this story was written way back in 1886, or at least it was published then, by Sarah Orne Jewett, who, as Helen told us last time, was a famous writer of short stories and novels. And, of course, this story is about growing up in Maine, the state of Maine, which is in the eastern part of the United States. It's very much in the countryside. There aren't very many big cities there. So, hey, if you grow up in Maine, you are a country person.
That's right. And for some reason, Maine has produced a lot of good writers, famous writers, American writers. One contemporary writer from Maine is Stephen King, whom you may have heard of. He is a writer of horror stories, and a lot of his books have been turned into movies.
Indeed. So you can bet this is an interesting story, and you'll probably be able to find a copy of it for free online somewhere. It's probably in the public domain. And yes, if you love the great outdoors and if you love birds, this might be an interesting story for you. So far, we've been talking about Sylvia. She's from the city, but she has moved to the countryside to help out her aging grandmother. And then she's in the forest one day, and she hears a whistle, and it turns out to be a guy who's looking for a white heron. And then they have dinner together at the grandmother's house, and the man offers Sylvia some money to help him find a white heron so that he can shoot it and stuff it and add it to his collection. And she reluctantly agreed, even though she doesn't want to see birds get hurt. And now we're going to continue with our story in today's lesson. So let's listen to the first part and find out what happens next.
The next day, Sylvia and the man searched the forest for the white heron, but they came back empty-handed. Sylvia, initially horrified by the man's pursuit, had by this time grown fond of him on account of his warm nature and vast knowledge of bird species. The two led the cow home together at dusk.
大家好，第一部分我们看到单字 empty-handed。这个字是形容词，指两手空空的或是一无所获的。例如 Roger came back from the competition empty-handed. Roger 参赛后空手而回。或者 I was hoping to get a free gift from the store, but I ended up empty-handed. 我原本希望能从那家商店获得免费礼品，但我最后一无所获。接着我们看到一个可数名词 pursuit， 指嗜好、娱乐活动或是消遣，像是My holiday pursuits included reading, hiking, and learning how to sail a boat. 我假日的消遣包括阅读、健行及学习如何开船。或是 If you like camping or other outdoor pursuits, then Zion National Park is the place for you. 如果你喜欢露营或其他户外娱乐活动的话，西安国家公园很适合你。另外，这个字当不可数名词用时，有追求或是追逐的意思。我们可以说They traveled to a distant country in pursuit of a better life. 他们去了一个很远的国家，以追求更好的生活。也可以说 The police gave up their pursuit when the thief left the country. 当那个小偷离开国家时，警方放弃了追捕。再补充这个字的动词 pursue, P-U-R-S-U-E, pursue, 表示追求、寻求或是追赶。举例来说 After earning her degree,Janet pursued a career in the pharmaceutical industry. Janet 拿到学位后，在制药产业找工作。再举个例子 Once Sarah decides to pursue a goal, nothing can stop her. 一旦 Sarah 决定追求一个目标，就没有事情能阻止她。再来，我们看到名词 dusk， 指黄昏或是傍晚。例如 After a long drive, Natalie arrived in the city at dusk. 在开了很长时间的车后Natalie 在黄昏抵达这座城市。或是 Many animals wait until dusk to go down to the river for a drink. 许多动物等到太阳下山后才去河边喝水。另外补充一个有 dusk 的片语 From dawn to dusk. Dawn, D-A-W-N, from dawn to dusk, 指从清晨到黄昏，或是从早到晚。像是 Farmers are known to work in their fields from dawn to dusk each day. 大家都知道农夫每天得从早到晚下田耕作。或者 To enter her dream school, Jessie studies from dawn to dusk. Jessie 为了进入她梦想中的学校，从早到晚都在读书。
So the next day, Sylvia and the man searched the forest for the white heron, but they came back empty-handed. So the following day, the day after they had dinner all together at Sylvia's grandmother's house, they went into the woods. Sylvia and the man went into the woods to look for that white heron, but they weren't able to find the white heron or any traces of it, so they came back empty-handed. When you come back empty-handed, it means you haven't gotten any results despite all of the efforts that you have made.
Indeed. So every once in a while, I go out looking for certain kinds of fruits. And I think it was in September, I went to a whole bunch of fruit shops looking for mangoes, and I came back empty-handed because the mango season had ended. So in this particular case, yes, the man went out. He searched the forest for the white heron, but he could not find it. At least Sylvia and the man did this together, and they could not find a white heron. They came back empty-handed, and Sylvia, initially horrified by the man's pursuit, had by this time grown fond of him on account of his warm nature and vast knowledge of bird species. So initially, at the beginning, she was horrified by the man's pursuit. If you're horrified, you're really scared at something. To horrify means to really scare someone, to really frighten them. And she thought that his pursuit or his goal of hunting that bird was horrible. It was a terrible thing to do. But later on, she grew fond of him because he knew a lot about birds.
That's right. So, for instance, a few days ago, I was horrified to learn about a tragic car accident that happened in the city where I used to live. Many people were killed, and that piece of news really horrified me. And here, Sylvia was horrified by the fact that this man was going to kill the bird and have it stuffed. So that was her initial reaction. But then, after a while, she stopped thinking about that because she started really liking this stranger, this man, on account of his warm nature. So he was really warm, nice, and friendly towards her. And he had a vast knowledge of bird species. So vast means very large and very wide. You can also say that the library has a vast collection of books. And here the phrase on account of means simply because of. So you can say, for instance, on account of his recent operation, he isn't able to take part in physical exercise. So here again, we have the word physical, which means related to the body. Because this person had an operation recently, on account of his operation, he is unable to take part in any exercises related to the body.
Exactly. So on account of is also expressed as because of. She had grown fond of him because of his warm nature, on account of his warm nature, and also because of his vast knowledge of bird species. He could see them, he could identify them by looking at the colors of their feathers, the nature of their call, the way they fly and stuff like that. He had vast knowledge of bird species. The two led the cow home together at dusk. And that's the end of the day when the sun is setting. That period of the day is referred to as dusk. And the opposite of that is dawn. And so sometimes we hear the phrase from dawn to dusk, which means all day.
That's right. So at this point, Sylvia has developed a liking towards this person. She likes him. She's become friends with him. And she is actively helping him realize his goal of finding this bird and turning it into a stuffed animal, a statue. And so far, everything is fine until the next day when something happens which will change her mind.
Let's find out what that is. Let's move on now to the second part of our lesson. We'll listen to it first.
Just before bed, Sylvia recalled that one tree in the forest stood taller than the rest. Were she to climb it, she would surely spot the heron's nest below. The thought made her so excited that she couldn't sleep. She finally slipped out at dawn to discover the heron's location before the man awoke.
So just before bed, Sylvia recalled that one tree in the forest stood taller than the rest. So Sylvia is getting ready for bed, and she's still thinking about the day and thinking about the quest for the white heron. And she recalled that one tree in the forest stood taller than the rest. When you recall something, you suddenly remember it. So she suddenly remembered that in the forest, there was one tree that was much taller than all of the other trees.
Right. One time somebody asked me what my aunt does for a living, and I said, well, I can't recall. She told me many years ago, but she lives out in Philadelphia, and I only see her about once every 2 or 3 years, so I just don't remember what she does for a living. I don't recall. But here she remembered, or she recalled, that one tree in the forest stood taller than the rest. It was taller than all the other trees in the forest. Were she to climb it, she would surely spot the heron's nest below. So here it says, were she to climb it. You could also say, if she were to climb it. You could also say, should she climb it, then she would see the heron's nest below. So yeah, if she were able to climb up to the top of that tree, she could look down or around, and then she would see the heron's nest, and then she would know where the heron is.
Yep. And the thought made her so excited that she couldn't sleep. So she kept on thinking about this plan of climbing the tree, the tallest tree in the forest, and trying to find the heron's nest from that point of view. She finally slipped out at dawn to discover the heron's location before the man awoke.
Exactly. So here, of course, we've got the phrase to slip out, and that's a verb phrase. That means you leave a place without being noticed. You leave a place quietly. It can also mean that you said something that you did not mean to say, and it would probably be embarrassing to the other person. One time many years ago, I met a person who had a huge birthmark on his neck, and I couldn't help it. I looked, wow. I said, look at that big birthmark on your neck. And then I said, oh, sorry, that just slipped out. I couldn't help myself. I shouldn't have said that. It's not considered polite to point out people's birthmarks.
Nope, that certainly isn't. So she slips out at dawn when the day is just starting so that she could look for the heron's nest by herself before the man awakes.
Okay, so that's what happened in the second part of our lesson. Let's move on now to the third part and find out what happens next.
Reaching the tree's highest branches was a triumph in itself, but nothing was more glorious than the moment Sylvia actually saw the heron. High as a bird, she felt as if she and the heron were one, and she suddenly realized she couldn't play a role in its death. The man was waiting for her when she returned home, but she refused to help him any longer. Sylvia wondered afterward whether giving up the money and the man's friendship was really worth the heron's life. But the treasures she might have gained were easily forgotten among the wonders of the wilderness.
最后第三部分，我们看到单字 triumph， 这个字是名词，指成就或是胜利，像是 Winning the race was a great triumph for the young runner。赢得这场赛跑对那位年轻跑者来说是很大的胜利。再举一个例子 The invention of the airplane is one of the greatest triumphs of 20th century technology. 飞机的发明是20世纪科技最伟大的成就之一。另外，这个字也可以是动词，指获得胜利或是赢过。我们可以说 Kenny hopes to triumph at the tennis match this weekend. Kenny 希望能在这周末的网球比赛获得胜利。或是The Swiss skier kept the lead for most of the race and finally triumphed. 这位瑞士滑雪者在比赛时都保持领先，并最终取得了胜利。
So Sylvia slipped out of the house at dawn to discover the heron's location. Reaching the tree's highest branches was a triumph in itself, but nothing was more glorious than the moment Sylvia actually saw the heron. So here, the fact that the tree is so tall and that you're able to climb it, that Sylvia was able to climb to the top of this tree, that activity itself was considered a triumph. So a triumph is a great success or a great achievement in something. To be able to climb to the top of that tree was a great success, a great triumph in itself. When you say in itself, you're saying even without considering anything else, like the fact that maybe the weather was really bad or it was raining or Sylvia had a sore ankle. So if you don't consider anything else, just the fact that being able to climb to the top of this tree was something of a great achievement.
So yes, it was great that she was able to climb so high. It was a triumph. It was a success. But nothing was more glorious than the moment Sylvia actually saw the heron. So yes, climbing was great in itself, but what was even greater, nothing was more glorious than the moment when she actually saw the heron. That was a really wonderful moment there. Nothing was more glorious. It was the most glorious thing that happened in that particular time. If something's glorious, it's really, really great. It has lots of glory to it. It's something worth celebrating. So it's something that's going to make you very, very happy and feel very successful. So yes, nothing was more glorious than the moment when she saw that heron, because that's the reason she went up there in the first place.
That's right. High as a bird, she felt as if she and the heron were one. And she suddenly realized she couldn't play a role in its death. So up until that point, she was still very willing to help the man in tracking down the bird so that he can accomplish his mission. But now that she has the point of view of the bird itself from high up, and she's able to identify with the bird by seeing the world almost through the bird's eyes, she decided that she was unable to play a role in its death. When you play a role in something, you're partly responsible for accomplishing that thing. And she decided that she wanted to have nothing to do with causing this great, beautiful bird to die.
She did not want to play a role in its death. She did not want to be part of its death. The man was waiting for her when she returned home, but she refused to help him any longer. So he probably asked, "Hey, where have you been? Did you find that heron?" And she said, "Well, I did, but I'm not going to tell you because you're going to kill it. And I feel a spiritual connection to that heron, and I'm not going to help you kill it." So there. Yeah.
Well, yes, I'm sure that's what they said to each other, but I'm not quite sure about the tone because they were good friends.
Well, I'm having fun there, of course, but yeah.
But yes, true. Sylvia goes home and tells the man, "I can't help you anymore." Maybe she didn't tell him why. Maybe she said, "I couldn't find the nest, couldn't find the heron, so I really can't spend any more time on this." But it was a very important decision for her because basically she decided not to accept the money. She didn't want to do this in exchange for money that could have helped her grandmother.
Indeed. So here in the final paragraph it says, Sylvia wondered afterward whether giving up the money and the man's friendship was really worth the heron's life, but the treasures she might have gained were easily forgotten among the wonders of the wilderness. So basically, she feels she did the right thing, even though she did not get the money from the man, and she also had to give up her friendship with the man. So she wondered afterward whether it was worth it. Was it worth it to give up the money? You know, one heron in the forest isn't going to hurt. There are probably hundreds of other herons in the forest somewhere. Maybe she would have regretted that, but still, she thought it was worth saving the heron's life. And of course, she also learned a lesson herself about respect for the forest and the creatures who live there. So I'm sure she did not feel guilty at all about telling the man to go take a hike.
Me neither. I think that she probably felt very good about it. And if the sacrifice is the friendship with this man, if the man were indeed a very nice person, very friendly towards her, then he would not allow something like this, her decision, to affect their friendship.
Okay, that brings us to the end of our explanation for today. It's time now to listen to our Chinese teacher.
各位同学大家好，我是 Hanny， 我们来看今天的文法重点。课文第二部分提到 Sylvia 在就寝前想起森林里面有一棵树比其他树都来得高，下一句就写说Were she to climb it, she would surely spot the heron's nest below. 要是她爬上去的话，肯定能看到下方苍鹭的巢。好，前半句用到 Were she to climb it， 其实这是来自 If she were to climb it， 它省略了 if， 然后把 were 移到句首而来的。我们来学习这样的用法。首先看到 be 动词搭配 to 加原形动词，可以表达将要怎么样，计划做某事。那当我们把它跟假设语气结合，写成 if 主词 were to 加原形动词的时候呢，可以用来表达未来可能发生的假设状况，表示说假如怎么样，万一怎么样。那这通常是指未来发生几率很低或者是极不可能发生的情况。好，那它的句型是 if 主词 were to 加原形动词逗号主词加上 could, would, might 或是 should 等等，再加原形动词。好，那么句型当中的 if 可以省略，然后呢，我们把 were 移到句首，摆在主词的前面来形成倒装，这时候句型就变成were 主词加上 to 加原形动词逗号主词加上 could, would, might 或是 should 再加原形动词咯。我们来造个例句 If they were to have children, they would need to move to a bigger house. 假如他们将来有小孩，就得搬进更大的房子去住了。好，那例句里面的 if 把它省略掉，然后把 were 移到句首，就会变成 Were they to have children, they would need to move to a bigger house.好，那我们看到在课文第三部分 Sylvia 爬上那棵树了，她像鸟一样身处于高空。课文写说 She felt as if she and the heron were one， 她觉得仿佛和苍鹭结为一体。好，那这边是要介绍 as if 的用法。As if 是表达仿佛、好像或是如同什么什么一样，那么后面是要接子句。当子句所描述的情况是事实或者是有可能发生的时候呢，子句要用直说法，也就是说啊，这个子句的时态照正常变化。你在描述现在事实就用现在式，在描述过去事实你就用过去式。假设你看到朋友眼睛红红的，眼眶泛泪，讲话还有鼻音，这时候啊，我们可能就会说What's wrong? You look as if you've been crying. 怎么啦？你怎么看起来好像在哭那这件事有可能是事实，所以我们这边不用假设语气表达，这个时态就叫正常咯。好，那如果要描述跟事实相反的情况，或者是表达某个假设情况时，子句是用假设法。像是我们要描述跟现在事实相反的情况啊，子句里面的动词要用过去式，然后 be 动词一律用 were， 这时候它的句型就是 as if 主词加上过去式动词或是 were。 例如 Amy's ex-boyfriend talks to her as if they were still together. Amy 的前男友对她讲话的样子仿佛他们还在一起呢，但事实上他们已经分开，所以这边用假设法 be 动词我们用 were 来表达。好，以上是今天重点整理，我们回顾今天的单字吧。
Horrify. Jeff was horrified to discover that his wife had gone missing. Pursuit. Lance enjoys outdoor pursuits, such as swimming and cycling. Vast. William looked out over the vast ocean and felt himself tremble. Recall. No, I don't recall having seen his car parked outside the house. Triumph. Joe was never a good student, so finishing high school was a triumph for him. Glorious. Anna opened her curtains and took in the glorious summer day.
Discussion Starter starts now!
It's time now for our discussion starter for today. And here is the question. Do you agree with Sylvia's actions, or do you think she should have taken the money and led the man to the heron? Why?
Well, I think Sylvia did the right thing by not taking the man's money and not telling the man where the heron's nest was, since we need more people in the world who will care about nature and think less about money so that we can protect all of the living creatures in this world?
Well, personally, I would need to know the current conservation status of the white heron there, or at least the conservation status of the bird at that time, because I think she should have actually taken the man's money and told him where the bird is and let him shoot the bird, because there are plenty of other herons in the forest. Nobody's going to miss just one of them. Well, everyone, today's article has come to an end, and I sure hope you enjoyed reading along with us. I am Roger.
I'm Helen.
See you next time.